Hello, welcome to the first year diploma course of Guru Nanak Institute of Technology. I'm Dr. Indrajit Bose and I shall be your course coordinator for this session. This paper is entitled Communicative English, and in the course of this paper, we are looking at the various forms, modes, and genres of communication, spoken and written, in the workplace world. You know that once you pass out of this course, you shall be joining the industry where you'll be required to interact with clients, customers, and other people in both written and spoken English. So, this paper hopes to equip you with the requisite skills in order to do this. This lecture is lecture 3 in the series, and it's part of the first unit. And we are talking about the writing of paragraphs from diagrams and charts over here. Basically, this lecture is a part of the unit on writing, and we are taking a look at how statistical data, which is graphically represented, can be the basis for writing description in the form of paragraphs. Now, you know that there are different kinds of data which can be statistically represented. We can have bar graphs, we can have pie charts, and line graphs. They all basically contain statistical data on the subject. Now, the figures are represented in this data in terms of years, months, or decades. So basically, we have to find out what is represented and what is the nature of the data that is represented in the chart. In fact, actually, the charts are compiled after a process of a lot of research and deliberation into the subject. So the studies into the subject are embodied in the one-page chart or graph, but actually it contains a lot of data packed together. So in writing, what we have to do is to explain all the elements which are packed together in that one-page chart or graph. Now, there can be data on a particular subject, or they can be comparative analysis of two different kinds of data. Like, for example, the performance of a product in two different fiscal years. Let's say 2018, 2019. So the statistics for that. The data basically also summarizes the outlook in a single view and enables us to understand the differences. Sometimes they point out at the underlying reasons for the changes in the data or the variations that come about as a result of time, various other factors, and other variables. So what are the causative factors or reasons behind the changes in data? So let's say the demography of a particular city. So the population increases every 10 years. So why is it increasing? So what are the reasons behind that? We might find that there are things like a lot of cures for different diseases, longer life expectancy, and the young population is staying in the country, various other reasons. Also, there are different kinds of trends, varying trends at various points of time. These trends we also have to express in writing, or we have to summarize and express them in writing. So basically, charts give us different kinds of data which is summarized as a result of a lot of research. Now, the data has been gathered with the help of a lot of research, and it is summarized in a very concise form with the help of a chart or graph. Now, our job is to explain what has gone into this research and to explain all the elements of this chart or graph so that we can explicate clearly the data which is summarized over there. Okay, right. So this is how charts give us. Now, how to begin this process of explanation of charts or graphs? So before we actually start writing, what are the steps to understanding this data? So the first thing that we have to do is to read the chart or graph that is given to us very, very carefully. Now, we note carefully what kind of data is the basis for this sort of chart or graph, and note the information which is summarized over there. Now, please also focus on the title of the chart or graph and see that it will indicate that what the chart is about, or what is the nature of the data which is summarized over there. Now, a data key is also likely to be given if there are different variables or factors over there which are summarized. So you study the data key and see what is the data that is given over there, and then note the variables in the axis. Note also how the data is showing change or development or maybe decline. Now, so once you have noted all this, you are in a better position to be able to understand what the chart or graph is really about, or whether it is showing any kind of change or development or decline, and how it is showing that. So then you can express these ideas in writing. Now, once you begin the writing process, after understanding what the chart or graph is about, then please summarize what are the important points that you have noted, and summarize what the graph shows, and also then summarize what are the basic trends which are reflected over there. So this is basically what you have to do in the description of the chart or graph. Now, I will explain what I'm talking about with the help of this bar chart that I have got. Now, let us see what this bar chart is about. So, we can see that the subject of this chart is basically the number of men and women in higher education or studying in higher education between the years 1970-71 to 1990-91. So, there's a 20-year period. During this period, the number of men and women studying in higher education. Now we can see that there is a dotted line running through the middle of the graph. So we have the graph in two parts, one representing the male population and the other representing the female population. So there is a comparative study really. So it's in two halves, one for men, one for women. Now the 3 decades are covered, 1970 to 71, 80 to 81, and 90 to 91. Now the data key that is supplied to us shows that the dark boxes represent the people in full-time education, and the gray box represents the people, both men and women, in part-time education. So we can see at a glance that the numbers of men and women both in all these years in part-time education is far higher than that of men and women in full-time education. The number of men and women in full-time education is actually very small, but it has grown over these years. Now, what does this bar chart basically show? Let us see. I'm briefly reading out from the points that I have noted over here. The bar chart shows the number of men and women in higher education between 1970-71 and 1990-91. The chart is in two halves, for men and for women. 3 decades are covered. The key shows the numbers in full-time and part-time education. Okay, so this much we have explored. Now let us see more about the data contained herein. There is a huge difference between those in full-time and those in part-time education. The number in full-time education keeps rising. It is nearly the same for women and men in 1990 and 91, and women outnumber men in part-time education. Sorry. Now, we see that in 1970-71, the number of men in full-time education was more than that of women. in 1980-81, the number of men was, in fact, it had grown since 1970-71, but the number of women in full-time education seems to have registered a huge leap between the years 1970-71 and 1980-81. So the number has increased by a large proportion, and in fact it has outstripped the number of men studying in the same period. Uh, that increase, however, is only marginal between the years 1980-81 and 1990-91. So that the number of men and women in higher education in full-time studies seems to be nearly the same in 1990-91. Now, what about the figures in part-time education? In part-time education, the number of men was substantially more than that of women in 1970-71. 1980-81, the number of women seems to have increased, certainly in part-time education, so that it is almost the same as that of men, but it is still a little less. And in 1990-91, the number of women has far outstripped the number of men in part-time education. So this is the explanation, basically, of the trends that we find in this particular chart. So in this way, you see, if you describe in details, you are describing the whole chart, and you will have written the paragraph in the process. Now, let us see other kinds of charts and graphs and the phrases that are used over there. Now, what kind of phrases can be used? For example, we can begin with a phrase like the given chart shows, or the bar chart shows, or the given chart, or the presented chart which is provided over here shows. So begin like this. Now, we can also say the diagram or the table or the figure, the shows or the illustration or the graph or chart or flow chart or pie chart or bar graph or column graph or line graph or table data or the diagram or map or pie chart, etc. shows or represents. We can also use verbs like depicts, enumerates, illustrates, presents, gives, provides, delineates, outlines, describes, denotes, expresses, compares, shows, contrasts, indicates, figures, gives data on, gives information on, presents information about, shows data about, demonstrates, sketches out, summarizes. So the more varied the phraseology is, the more interesting our paragraph descriptions will be. And suppose we have a lot of different kinds of data to summarize or express in words, then the more varied the phrases are, the more interesting it will be, our descriptions. Now, what about the description? We can again use phrases like the comparison of, the differences, the changes, the number of, information on or data on, the proportion of, the amount of, information on, data about, comparative data, the trend of, the percentage of, the ratio of, and so on. So these are some of the phrases which can be used. For describing trends, again, we can use phrases like this. For example, to show upwardly mobile trends, we can say the increase or rise or soar or climb up, inflate, surge, jump, rocket, or hike. Again, we can use adverbs to describe trends like mildly, firmly, rapidly, swiftly, sharply, abruptly, promptly, quickly, slightly, steadily, sharply, suddenly, speedily, tediously, constantly, ceaselessly, persistently, consistently, significantly, and dramatically. Again, to show downward trends, we can use expressions like fall, sink, drop, decline, decrease, descend, plummet, diminish, and dwindle. So these are some of the verbs and adverbs we can use to describe upward and downward movements. Now, we have looked at bar charts. Now, what about pie charts? Because these are another kind of data which are represented. Now, again, when you are describing pie charts, first see what the pie chart is about, describe the subject, then talk about the main data coordinates. Then go into the main features, explore them, and describe the differences and developments, and then summarize the trends. Now, I'm reading out briefly from the description of this pie chart. The pie chart below illustrates how internet users aged 16 plus prefer to access the internet at home and in other places. Summarize the information in the pie chart by selecting and reporting the main features. Okay, so what does the pie chart show? This graph shows the results of a survey in which people aged 16 and over were asked about the preferred devices for accessing the internet. The question referred to going online at home and in other places. Participants mentioned four main devices in their answers: a smartphone, a laptop, a tablet, and a desktop computer. Okay, from the pie chart, it is clear that the majority of participants prefer to use smartphones and laptops, with just 3% difference between the two. Nearly a third of participants prefer to go online with a smartphone. 30% like to use a laptop. A desktop computer accounts for 14% of users' preferred devices. Only a small minority prefer a device other than these main four. In conclusion, since mobile and portable devices are the most popular choices, it is clear that many participants are accessing the internet outside their homes. The desktop computer is the least popular of the four main devices. In future, we can probably expect to see more and more people accessing the internet with smartphones as their preferred choice. So this is the explanation of the pie chart. So 33% using the smartphone to access the internet, 30% on a laptop, 19% on a tablet, and only 14% on a desktop computer. So we have seen how the data contained in the pie chart is explained in details, and also all the trends and the figures are spoken about. So a detailed explanation is like this, what we do from a pie chart. Okay, in comparing data, which is often done when we have a pie chart, we can use the following phrases for data comparison. For adding, you can say and also, as well as, moreover, to, furthermore, or additionally. For sequencing, we can use phrases like first, second, third, finally, next, meanwhile, after, then, or subsequently. For illustrating, we can use phrases like, for example, such as, for instance, in the case of, as revealed by, or illustrated by. For cause and effect, we can use phrases like because, so, therefore, thus, consequently, hence. For comparing, we can use phrases like similarly, likewise, as with, like, equally, in the same way. For qualifying, we can use expressions like but, however, although, unless, except, apart from, as long as, and if. For contrasting, we can use expressions like whereas, instead of, alternatively, unlike, on the other hand, or conversely. For emphasizing, we can use expressions like above all, in particular, especially, significantly, indeed, or notably. So these are some of the phrases which can be used for cause and effect, illustrating, contrasting, qualifying, comparing, and adding. Now, more examples to show how to describe a pie chart. Now, this pie chart, for example, it shows the modes of travel in 1990 in Norway. Now, what does this pie chart show? The largest proportion segment obviously seems to be people traveling by bus, and that is marked in orange. Again, the second largest one is those traveling by car, which is marked in yellow. People traveling by cycle are marked in mauve. People by taxi are marked in pale blue, and people walking are marked out in green. Now, I'm reading out the description. Largest proportion, of course, is people traveling by bus, followed by people traveling by car. And then there is people walking, and those by cycle and taxi are much less. Okay, let me read out from the description over here. The pie chart shows the proportion of people using different modes of transport in Norway in 1990. The largest percentage of people, about 60%, were traveling by bus. Nearly an equivalent number, around 40%, were going by car. Around 30% preferred to walk, and 25% were going by cycle, while only 10% were going by taxi. Okay, so this is the explanation of this particular pie chart. Okay, we can also have, however, charts which are comparative studies of two different pie charts, like, for example, this one. Now, I'm reading out what is contained over here. The charts below give information about different types of waste disposal of one country in 1960 and 2011. To summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, the waste disposal system in the country between two different years, widely separated in time, 1960 and 2011. So there's a huge time gap actually, almost 50 years between the two different pie charts. Now, what does it represent? Obviously, the data seems to have changed a lot in this time. Now, the key seems to indicate that there are different kinds of data represented by people using paper, green waste, metal, glass, wood, plastic, food, textiles, and other. Okay, now I'm reading out from the description. The charts show a contrastive analysis of the waste disposal of various items in 1960 and in 2011 in Singapore. It is seen that the percentage of paper waste has been reduced from 25 to 15%. Wood, plastic, food, and textiles wastes have all increased from 4% to 8%. Glass, green waste, and metal are nearly the same. Other wastes have declined from 12% to 4%. So you can see how I'm using the describing words increased, nearly the same, declined, etc. in describing the trends. So this is what you will also have to do when you describe the pie charts and comparison charts. Okay, now we have a line diagram. Now, what is this line diagram about? Basically, it is comparing the car thefts, the number of car thefts in three different countries: Sweden, France, and Canada. And the years of comparison are between 1990 to 1999. Now we find from studying this line graph that in 1990, Sweden recorded the highest number of car theft cases, followed by Canada and France. Now, the data in France is showing that the number of car thefts rose and fell, then rose again in 1995 and fell again gradually till 1999. Sweden went on to the highest level, and in 1999, so it is continuously registering an upward increase. So car thefts in Sweden are increasing beyond anything, and they are not decreasing at all. Canada, well, as far as Canada is concerned, the car thefts fell till 1993, and then they continued at an even rate till 1999. So there isn't really complete stopping of car thefts, and it's still continuing in spite of all efforts by the police and other people. So the number of car thefts in Sweden is quite high, and in fact it is going on rising, meaning that it is becoming higher and higher. Whereas in Canada and France, the number of thefts is limited at the moment, and it has fallen from what it was in 1991. Okay, so this is the explanation of the line diagram. Now, the descriptive terms which can be used, for example, are like this. Overall, there was widespread adoption of new technology during these years. Nearly 9 out of 10 people in the UK were online by 2015. Mm, then nearly half the population to this smartwatch ownership, so on. Increased dramatically, again, other phrases that we use to register the increase, increased dramatically, grew strikingly, tripled, a steep upward trajectory, slowed down noticeably, surge, near zero, climbing more slowly, rose steadily, a modest 4 percentage points, leveling off, peaked, and so on. These are some of the descriptive terms which can be used. Now, again, another line graph showing the music sale. Now, here we have the percentage of music sales by methods like streaming, downloads, and CDs purchased. Now, the line graph shows the sales of music. I'm reading out from the description. The line graph shows the sales of music, including CDs, streaming, and downloads between 2011 and 2018. Streaming has increased continually from 2011 to 2018, while CDs have declined from 60% to 20%. Downloads peaked to 40% in 2014 but fell continuously after that to a low of 30% in 2018. So we find that downloads were very popular around 2014 and then they have fallen sharply or they have registered a sharp decline. Whereas that of streaming has gone on upward, higher and higher so that it is substantially increased to 40% now. And CDs purchased again have fallen steeply. Okay, so this is the line graph of music sales. Again, we can have another comparison and contrast. Now, these two charts show the energy production figures in 1995 and 2005 in Finland. While coal and gas accounted for 29 to 30% of the energy sources, these figures had only marginally increased around this time. Petroleum had fallen nearly 10%, while nuclear energy has increased from 6.4% to 10%, and other energy sources by 5%. So we find that the coal uh, that is being used as an energy source has increased from 29 to 30%. So it has increased certainly, but not much. Whereas with the other sources, they were only 4.9%. They have risen up to 9%, which is a significant increase. And then again, nuclear energy, which is used, again, it shows an increase from 6.4% to 10.10%. So we can say that nuclear energy is being used much more. Whereas we find that petroleum, which was being used around 29%, is now used 19.55%. And gas has, the use of gas has increased from 29.63% to 30.31%. Okay, so what we find is that the use of renewable energy sources like nuclear energy has increased, whereas those of non-renewable sources like gas and coal and petroleum have not increased that much. In fact, with petroleum, it seems to have fallen. For non-renewable, it has increased a little, but not a great deal. It's a marginal increase. So we can say that as far as energy production is concerned, there is more focus on non-renewable rather than on renewable sources. But still, the renewable ones are being utilized further, particularly nuclear energy. So we are moving in the right direction, it seems. So we can say that the basic trends of these particular years are summarized in this data. So how the data will be explained and how it will be explained in the form of paragraph is this is important, and you can do that once you start writing. Basically, in a paragraph description of data contained in a chart or graph, there are sufficient elements to be explained. So there is no dearth of material, And in fact, there are a lot of things to be explained. And unless you explain the entire thing, it is not possible that we will be able to make out all the elements contained in the chart or graph, or that we can understand properly what the chart or graph is about. So don't keep anything up your sleeve, don't keep anything unexplained. When you are going into the details of a chart or graph, go into details as much as possible and try to explicate everything about the chart or graph, what it is about, what it is showing, and what you feel as your interpretation of the trends which are changing and developing over there. So do all this and explain clearly in describing a paragraph or chart. So I have tried to explore the analysis of a chart or graph and how paragraph description can be written on the basis of chart or graph. And I hope that this will help you in your writing exercises with all kinds of statistical data which is compiled, and you will find this useful in your writing lectures. So with that, I end this particular lecture, and we will meet again with other aspects of writing in later lectures to come. Thank you.